Ethan Cole had never thought of himself as important. In the grand scale of the Galactic Union, he was just a human among thousands of alien species. Humanity had joined the Union only 20 years ago, and most species still considered humans fragile, emotional, and far too short-lived to matter. While they had advanced technology and courage, many aliens dismissed humans as an amusing curiosity, interesting but hardly threatening. Ethan, however, knew something that most of the galaxy did not. Humans had a strength that could not be measured by logic, by lifespan, or by weapons. They had choice, emotion, and stubbornness. Ethan's life was far from glamorous. He worked as a linguistic engineer inside the Grand Union Palace on Aurelian Prime, a glittering capital world that floated in the midst of the Union's central system. The palace was a marvel of engineering, massive structures floating without support, vast halls carved from shining metals, and gardens that hovered in zero gravity. For most species, the palace was a symbol of power, tradition, and control. For Ethan, it was an overwhelming place of endless rules and political intrigue, a place where a single misstep could erase a human's chance to ever be respected. Humans were rarely allowed inside the palace. Those who were admitted were either diplomats, soldiers, or specialists. Ethan was a specialist. He had been hired for his unusual ability to understand alien languages and emotions, something humans seemed naturally gifted at. While most species communicated in rigid patterns, humans had learned to interpret tones, gestures, and subtle emotional cues over millennia. It was their survival skill on Earth, honed over thousands of years of conflict and cooperation. That ability had brought him here, but it also made him painfully aware of how small humans appeared next to other species. Among the palace's many residents, one stood out above all others, Princess Serafina Valentra. She was the heir to one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Her species lived for over 300 years and valued logic, control, and diplomacy above all else. Emotion was considered a liability, weakness a threat. Marriage among them was not personal, it was a political tool, a contract that secured alliances and power. For a human like Ethan, the thought of even speaking to her personally was almost unimaginable. Yet he had spoken to her, many times, quietly and carefully. During meetings he attended as a translator, he noticed her attention. She would ask questions that were not required by protocol, questions about Earth, about humans, about why they fought so fiercely even when the odds were hopeless. Most aliens would dismiss humans as fragile and unworthy. She listened. It was during one of these routine diplomatic gatherings that everything changed. Representatives from various species filled the hall. Some were enormous, armored creatures with voices like thunder. Others were delicate and translucent, their thoughts projected through colors. Ethan stayed at the edges of the hall, translating, noting, observing. The discussion turned to humans. Some species laughed at them openly. They have barely learned to survive on their home planet, one diplomat sneered, a blue-scaled being with 6 eyes. And they think they can influence the galaxy. Ethan felt his blood heat, but he stayed calm. That was his gift, remaining calm while the galaxy judged him. Princess Serafina was quiet, listening to everything. Then unexpectedly she asked Ethan a question directly. "What do humans value most?" she asked. Her voice was soft but carried across the chamber, sharp enough to silence the mocking aliens. Ethan paused. The answer came from deep inside him, not from fear, not from protocol, but from what he had always believed. "Choice," he said finally, "the freedom to choose even when the universe says no." A stunned silence fell. In Serafina's culture, emotion was dangerous. Words like freedom or choice were considered frivolous. Yet she nodded thoughtfully, as if understanding something they could not. The other diplomats muttered among themselves, offended or confused by a human's audacity. Ethan, feeling the weight of the room, muttered quietly, almost to himself, "I wish I could marry her." He did not mean anyone would hear him. He meant it as a dream, an impossible thought. Humans had no place among royalty of her kind. No human had ever been allowed such proximity. The words were almost lost in the echo of the hall, but the universe had other plans. Princess Seraphina turned slowly, her eyes locking on his. The world seemed to stop for a moment. The hall went silent again, as if the very air held its breath. Then she spoke, with a calmness that surprised even the most disciplined diplomats. "I accept." The words were simple. The meaning was earth-shattering. In her culture, a public acceptance of a proposal was binding. No law had changed in centuries, yet the moment her voice echoed across the hall, it became real. Humans, aliens, and nobles alike froze. Guards whispered among themselves. Some diplomats gasped, others muttered curses at the audacity of a human. Ethan could not move. He had spoken a dream aloud, and it had been accepted. He was aware that the galaxy had never seen anything like this before. A human, a fragile creature by every standard, was now officially bound to a princess of one of the oldest civilizations in existence. The palace erupted into chaos. Council members demanded explanations. Officials argued over whether the binding could be nullified. Some laughed at what they assumed was a mistake. Others were too afraid to act, uncertain of the consequences. Princess Seraphina remained calm, her gaze steady on Ethan. She did not flinch. She did not explain herself. She simply allowed the binding to exist. Ethan was escorted from the hall by the palace guards, though he did not resist. He was confused, overwhelmed, and terrified, but a small spark of excitement burned inside him. This was bigger than any diplomatic achievement, bigger than any human had achieved in the entire history of the Union. Humans had just stepped into history, and it was terrifying. Over the next few days, the implications began to settle in. The Galactic Union was not prepared for a human to be married to a royal. Politicians debated whether humans were worthy. Scholars argued over whether it was legal. The press from countless species broadcasted the news across the galaxy. Some called Ethan reckless, some foolish, some heroic. Most were stunned that a human could even exist in such a position. Ethan, meanwhile, tried to understand the princess. Why had she done it? Why had she accepted a human, a species that everyone else thought weak? He found answers in quiet conversations with her over the following weeks. She revealed that she had studied humans in secret. She had read about Earth, observed human behavior, watched how humans adapted to impossible odds, how they bonded, and how they protected each other without needing logic to justify it. She admired their stubbornness, their courage, and their ability to survive against overwhelming odds. It was a revelation to Ethan. The humans he knew were strong, but he had never considered that an alien princess would see strength in humanity the way he did. She had chosen him not because of his status, but because of what he represented: human spirit, human courage, human heart. As the days passed, Ethan realized that the challenges had only just begun. The other species were watching closely. Some plotted against him. Others tried to influence the princess, and the council began to speak of trials, ancient tests designed to evaluate the worthiness of a royal partner. No human had ever faced them, and few had survived them. Yet the princess did not hesitate to suggest that he attempt them. Ethan knew the trials would be difficult, perhaps impossible. They would test mind, body, will, and loyalty. They would push him to his limits, but he did not hesitate. Humanity had survived worse. He had survived worse. And now, for the first time in his life, he had something worth fighting for, not just survival, but respect, honor, and love. The palace seemed different now. Where before he had felt small, now he felt like a participant in history. Every corner, every hallway, every meeting carried weight. The galaxy was watching, and humans, for the first time, had a place in the story that no one would forget. Ethan stood in the palace gardens one evening, looking at the stars that hung like diamonds above Aurelian Prime. Princess Seraphina walked beside him silently. She did not speak, yet her presence was comforting. The two of them, human and alien, were bound together by something no one could fully understand: respect, courage, and the daring audacity to dream. "I still can't believe it," Ethan said quietly. "That you accepted me." Seraphina looked at him, her expression unreadable, yet there was something almost human in her eyes. "You surprised me," she said simply. "Humans have a way of doing the impossible. That is what I admire." Ethan smiled, though it was small and nervous. He knew the trials ahead would be unlike anything he had faced, but he also knew that for the first time in his life, he was not alone. And perhaps, just perhaps, humans were not as small in the galaxy as everyone thought. As the night fell and the palace lights shimmered like distant stars, Ethan understood one truth. In a universe that had underestimated humanity for centuries, a single human had managed to capture the attention of one of the most powerful beings alive, and in doing so, had changed the galaxy forever. The news of Ethan's acceptance by Princess Seraphina spread across the galaxy. Like wildfire, every major species in the Galactic Union debated the consequences, questioned the legality, and speculated on the humans' motives. Ethan had expected ridicule, but he had not anticipated the mixture of fear and curiosity that followed. To most species, humans were still fragile, short-lived creatures. Yet here was one, a single human, now officially bound to a royal princess of one of the oldest civilizations in existence. It was impossible to ignore. The council demanded that Ethan prove himself. Centuries ago, the Union had established the trials of worth, a series of challenges meant to test a partner's mind, body, and spirit before marriage to royalty. No human had ever attempted these trials. Many had perished even attempting them, yet Princess Seraphina insisted. She had confidence in Ethan, not because of what he was, but because of what humans could be. Ethan had only days to prepare. The trials would test him in ways he could not imagine. They would examine strength, endurance, intelligence, loyalty, and morality. Some were physical, some mental, some required sacrifices that might seem cruel or impossible. Still, he did not hesitate. Humanity, he believed, had survived far worse than any trial a galaxy could create. The first trial was set on the volcanic planet of Kael'thar, a place known for extreme heat and unstable terrain. The trial was called the Gauntlet of Endurance. Ethan's task was simple in description but terrifying in execution. Traverse the entire volcanic zone, retrieve a symbolic crystal, and return to the trial masters alive. Many before him had entered and never returned. As he stepped onto the planet's surface, the heat was immediate, pressing against his skin like a living thing. Alien spectators watched from hovering platforms above, skeptical that a human could survive even a few minutes. Ethan reminded himself that humans were adaptable, and he began moving carefully, measuring each step. Lava streams split the terrain unpredictably, and occasional tremors shook the ground beneath him. Every instinct screamed to turn back, yet he pressed forward. Hours passed, and the heat, exhaustion, and fear began to take their toll. Ethan stumbled repeatedly, sometimes falling into shallow lava streams, sometimes nearly being crushed by falling rocks. At one point, he felt his strength fail entirely. His legs shook uncontrollably. But he did not give up. Humans had learned to survive through determination, even when the body threatened to quit. Crawling, dragging himself, he continued, step by step, breath by breath. Finally, as the molten rivers roared beside him, Ethan reached the crystal. It shimmered with a light that reflected both the sun and the heat of the planet itself. With trembling hands, he picked it up. The spectators above gasped. Many had assumed he would fail within the first hour, yet he had reached the goal. Not because of sheer strength, but because of his relentless determination. a quality few species could understand. The second trial tested mind and loyalty. Ethan was presented with a choice: accept a promise of immense power and prestige in exchange for loyalty to the Union over his home planet, Earth. The trial masters offered him positions of authority, unimaginable wealth, and the ability to shape entire systems. Yet in doing so, he would betray humanity, sacrificing Earth for personal gain. Ethan considered briefly, then shook his head. "I cannot betray my people," he said simply. "Humanity's strength is in standing together, not kneeling for safety." The trial masters frowned. Many species would have chosen the power, seeing no harm in prioritizing survival over morality. But humans were different. Humans had principles, even when survival was uncertain. The masters noted his answer, recording it in their systems. Ethan's refusal did not please them, but it marked him as something unusual, something unpredictable. The final trial was the hardest. It required a choice between saving oneself or saving another participant in danger. Ethan watched as a fellow candidate, an alien from a species known for intelligence and agility, was trapped under a collapsing structure. The trial allowed him to escape unharmed if he left the alien behind. Ethan hesitated only for a moment. Without a second thought, he ran toward the trapped alien, lifting debris and holding the structure with all his strength. Pain shot through his body, cuts opened on his arms and legs, but he did not stop. He refused to leave a life behind. When the alien was free, Ethan collapsed, exhausted and bleeding. He had passed the trial, but the cost had been great. Princess Seraphina watched silently throughout all 3 trials. She had not needed to speak to him to express her confidence. Her eyes reflected pride, admiration, and a quiet understanding of what it meant to be human. The trials were designed to test candidates by alien standards, yet Ethan had surpassed them by human standards. His perseverance, courage, and loyalty had no equal. The council, initially resistant, had no legal ground to deny the marriage. They argued endlessly about protocol, precedence, and tradition, but every objection fell apart under the weight of human determination. A new understanding swept through the Union. Humans were unpredictable, stubborn, and capable of feats no other species could imagine. After the trials, Ethan recovered in the palace, tending to cuts, bruises, and exhaustion. The media of countless species documented his every move. Interviews, debates, and articles flooded the galaxy. Some ridiculed him as reckless. Some praised him as a symbol of human potential. But everyone agreed on one thing: humans could not be ignored. Ethan took quiet walks through the palace gardens to clear his mind. Seraphina often accompanied him, not speaking at first, merely walking beside him. Eventually she spoke, her voice calm and measured. "You survive not because you are strong in the way my species measures strength, but because you are human. That is what I admire," she said. Ethan smiled weakly. "I never thought anyone could see that as strength," he admitted. "Strength is not only in power or logic," she replied. "It is in courage, choice, and loyalty. Humans have all 3 in ways few species ever understand. That is why I accepted you." Her words stayed with him. Ethan realized that the trials had been more than tests. They were a statement to the galaxy. Humans were not weak, fragile, or insignificant. They were beings of courage, principle, and indomitable will. And now the galaxy had witnessed it firsthand. Weeks passed and the formal preparations for the marriage began. The palace buzzed with activity. Diplomats, scholars, and nobles debated seating arrangements, ceremonial procedures, and potential political repercussions. Yet amidst the chaos, Ethan and Seraphina found moments of quiet together. They shared stories of their lives, of humanity, of the galaxy. Ethan told her about Earth, about the struggles humans faced, about small victories that shaped the species. She listened, fascinated. He realized she was not only a princess of power, but also a student of life. eager to understand what made humans remarkable. When the day of the ceremony arrived, representatives from hundreds of species filled the grand hall. The ceremony followed centuries-old tradition, yet the atmosphere was electric, unlike any event the Union had witnessed. Humans were watching from Earth and from other colonies, eager to see one of their own make history. Ethan stood beside Serafina, dressed in attire designed to respect both human and alien customs. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with awe. He had traveled from being a simple linguistic engineer to a figure whose actions had changed the way the galaxy viewed humanity. The moment was overwhelming. The ceremony began, the ancient rites recited in languages that had not been spoken for centuries. When the final words were spoken, sealing the union, Ethan felt a surge of pride unlike anything he had experienced. Humans, for the first time in recorded history, had proven their worth on a scale no one could ignore. After the ceremony, Ethan and Serafina walked through the palace gardens. The stars above Aurelian Prime shimmered, reflecting in the artificial lakes and floating fountains. Ethan looked at Serafina, finally able to speak words he had long held in his heart. "I never imagined this would happen," he said quietly. "You made it happen," she replied. "Not by luck, but by showing the galaxy what humans can do. You survived, chose, and protected. You acted when others would have faltered." Ethan felt a surge of emotion. Humans were often underestimated, dismissed, and laughed at. Yet here he was, standing beside one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, respected by countless species, and about to embark on a journey that would reshape history. In the days and weeks that followed, humans gained a new place in the Union. They were no longer curiosities or weaklings. They were recognized as beings of principle, courage, and remarkable adaptability. And Ethan, who had spoken a simple wish in a crowded hall, had become a symbol of everything humanity could achieve when they refused to accept limits. As he stood beside Serafina on a balcony overlooking the capital, Ethan realized the truth of the legend. Humans were unpredictable, often underestimated, but unstoppable when it mattered most. They loved, they chose, and they fought, not for glory, but because it was who they were. The galaxy had finally learned to respect humanity, and the story of a human who dared to speak a wish aloud, only to have a princess accept it, would be told for centuries to come. Ethan smiled, feeling the warmth of Serafina's hand in his. Together, they would navigate the challenges ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. Humanity had arrived, not through conquest or terror, but through courage, choice, and an unyielding spirit that no alien could ever truly understand. And so the human and the princess stood together, looking at the stars, ready to face the universe, knowing that for the first time humanity had earned its place among the stars, not as a footnote, but as a force to be reckoned with.